Two, one, and we are streaming on Periscope, YouTube, and Eric's Facebook. We are good.
Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is episode 2, if we want to call them episodal, of Same Here, Hear Us Out. And the first session I thought was incredible. It was real. It was raw. The background was the way this came together. I'm going to give a little bit of a repeat here. Is that as an organization, we run an organization from a mental health nonprofit standpoint. The genesis of which the message is same here. Same here meaning mental health is not just about 1 in 5 with mental illness, 4 in 5 who are healthy, normal, fine, and okay. But it's about 5 in 5 of us. It's about all of us who live on this mental health continuum and how we're all impacted and how life situations affect all of us. And if we attack the topic of mental health that way and the commonalities and the similarities and the things that we go through, that's a more collaborative, productive way for us to address the topic of mental health, is to do it together. And in that vein, as we were seeing some of the things play out from a social justice perspective out in the community, out in the world, the idea was we're seeing so much being communicated through social media. We're seeing so much being communicated through traditional media. We're seeing so much being communicated through tabloid media and the way in which clips are being taken out of context and they seem to be used to be divisive, that there's so much being lost in translation, so much of it being lost in translation because if especially there's some interest in some of the folks who are posting some of those things, let's use, for the purpose of all of us, a traditional media as an example, because I think that's one that we could all agree with. What that does is it doesn't allow us to come together and discuss each of our different vantage points, how we grew up, where we came from, the way in which our friends talk to us and relate to us and say, have you heard about this? This is how I feel about it. How do you think they, whatever they is, let's talk politics, liberal, conservative, right? They, let's talk about what's going on in social justice, white people versus black people. Like, how does each side understand it? And I think we tiptoe around things and we don't dive into the topics and really have out and out conversations like what we had on the first one. Now, what I'll share with everyone as we go to introduce everyone who's on the panel today is these are meant to be episodal in that they build off of each other. And so for the folks who watched the first episode, the two main questions that we grapple with, and so for Sabri and Mario, right before I introduce you all, just as a reminder in terms of the stuff that we had covered, the two main topics, the first question was, do we feel like both in the white community and the black community that there is an understanding systematically of all that's gone into where we're at right now in 2020? Or do we think that most people are reacting to what they're seeing, current events in the news right now with the Floyd murder, with all the talk of all the deaths that have taken place, with seeing all the protests going on and the marches going on? Are people focused more on that, or do people have a good understanding of the history that's gone into this? I think we left the conversation agreeing that there's a lot left to the imagination, or a lot left to be desired in terms of what our schools teach in terms of the history systematically of what's gotten us up to this point. The second topic that we touched on was the comfort level of what we in the white community, we in the black community, what do we say to each other personally as friends? What do we say to each other publicly in support of each other? Is something looked at as just like, oh, you're doing it for the sake of saying that you're an ally, but are you really an ally? What does it take to actually be an ally? And so I'd say we tiptoed the line of getting into some sensitive topics, and Dot and I were laughing, like we took a couple of the blows on some of the things that we said, but that's part of this conversation, and that's part of what we need to have out here. And so, we'll be working during this session on 2 more questions that we're going to be diving a lot deeper into. And as we work towards those questions, I wanted to reintroduce Don Povia, who is the president of Transition Sports and Entertainment and an initiative called The Outside Game. He works with athletes on everything that's taking place off the court, off the field, off the ice. Their brand their communication, their initiatives. And that, as we go around with questions, I'm sure they'll introduce themselves more. Sabria Dobbins, who is with an organization called Project Passport, where started very much on the ground, boots on the ground in terms of retreats and helping folks from a mental health standpoint with the actual doing of exercises, not just the talking about it, not just the relaying messages back and forth, but what are we actually doing to heal and get better, which has now moved to some more virtual programs because of the COVID era we're in, but we'll continue to grow. And then Mario Mays, who I met through some folks with an organization called SUV, which does a lot of streaming work in sports, in and around youth sports a lot, and content work. And they have a nonprofit wing that Mario's in charge of, which is called Beyond the Bench, where they do a lot of programming in communities where I think folks look at sports and say, is sports my only out? But if you don't get to that next level, what else is there for you in the front office, in other areas of sports in general, in industry in general, right? And being able to help connect the dots and give folks different opportunities beyond the core sport that they've been playing. So really diverse panel, diverse group, all different areas of the country. And so, as we dive into the first question right here, please, by all means, take an opportunity if you want to go a little bit deeper into your background. But at the same time, if those first two questions that we discussed on the last conversation are things that you also want to touch on as you answer this question, please, by all means, do that as well. And so my first question, this is going to be a hard-hitting one. I'm going to start with a difficult one. So we hear the term systematic racism. We hear the term systematic injustices. And so my question would be, if we're going to attack this grandiose topic in a very, very strategic way that's going to move us forward, does it make sense for us as we work together as allies to discuss systematic things inclusive of the relationship between what's going on with the police and persons of color as a piece of the overall systematic ways in which we need to make change? Or do we think that we should separate that piece out because it's such a current event topic, it's such an emotionally driven topic, that some of the stuff that's happened for 400 plus years, we could point to and we can say factually, there's a lot of gaps that we're missing. Let's first fill in the gaps there so systematically we could explain where things aren't equal. Or do we want to couple them together with what's going on current event wise with some of the police situations and some of the deaths that we've seen? So Sabria, I'm going to start with you with that question. I know that's a mouthful, but please go into it as much as you'd like.
So I think that, I've been saying this statement to a lot of people. We must deconstruct our history in order to reconstruct our future. And I've been saying that because many people, like you talked about the question earlier, how people, do they know about the systems? They don't. Many people do not know how the systems interplayed to get us where we are. It took the housing and redlining discrimination to get us where we are with police brutality as we look back. It took the economic starvation of minority populations to get where we were, where the police brutality can happen. So I think that they all are interrelated. No matter how much we try to separate them, it's like fixing one piece and then the other part of the house keeps falling apart. We were built on a shaky foundation to begin with. So for me, I think that it's very important that we look at the root of even where policing came from on top of that. So think about it. When you look back at the history of policing, it was really established during that time of, slavery, of trying to keep the slaves where they're supposed to be. Even with the Fugitive Slave Act and all those things, policing began to grow. So we know that policing did not initially begin to protect all populations. It was only for select populations. So I think that it's going to be very important that we start with the economic piece. We look at the housing piece. We start to work our way through all of the units. And I think that if we're willing to have kind of a task force on each of those initiatives and we can work together, then it can really address that police brutality piece. Because we can work on police relationships with the community all day, but it doesn't fix the fact that these communities are in poverty. These communities are like in a tank of a few resources and are piranhas trying to get to them. And I don't think it's even a race thing. It's just an economic thing at that point. People want to say, black on black crime, all this stuff. I mean, take any impoverished area in the world, there's going to be more crime because you're putting a few people in with a little access, or a lot of people in with little access to resources. So that's kind of
all of whom might have some background trauma going into that as well, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that plays into it in a big way. So I'm going to hold your feet to the fire a little bit on your answer as we transition to Mario here. Sabria, is I totally hear how they're all part of the same, right? And you're talking about where policing started from and how it may have started from controlling, right, a certain group or groups of people. I guess my question is coming from the standpoint of we're now in 2020. And intellectually, that these things are coupled together, the history of them are coupled together. But my question is, as someone who grew up and had schooling where we learned about slavery, and we learned about, I brought this up in the last one, Abraham Lincoln, and then we learned about Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, right? Like, that's all we heard about. And so there's such a rich history in terms of factually things that went on that are maybe less explosive to talk about, that are just, these are the facts, like redlining, like Jim Crow laws, right? That I wonder whether educating on systematically why we've led to a place where there's inequality separate from what's going on with policing in the black community right now, that would at least educate people to a point now where when we tackle something that's a little bit more of a volatile topic, because we're seeing it in front of us play out on social media, on our phones, the second that it happened, is there any thought to having a society that has a greater understanding of all the factors that went in first, may be a little bit of a more strategic way to get to some of the more volatile topics that are more difficult to address right now. And that's not saying don't address what's going on. That's saying, like, just educationally, do we start there?
I mean, education's important, but action is just as important too. So we're going to have to let everybody understand the systems. I mean, I'm constantly sharing those resources out there, little simple videos that kind of give you 3 minutes of the breakdown, even though it's been hundreds of years of things to explain in that 3 minutes. I mean, we're going to not only need people who are going to be willing to be educated, but we need people who are going to be willing to be advocating about change. Because I think that more people can know, and that's great, but then what do we do with that? A lot of people can say, yes, I know I have privilege. Woo, yes, I know. But then what? What do you do with that privilege? Where do you apply that privilege? How do you, are you okay with the fact that if we change our system, things will change for you? You will not have the same accesses that you had before, potentially. Are you okay with that? So this redistribution that's going to have to occur in our society. So, I mean, yes, the education is key, and that might be the first kind of overall stage in the awakening of this world. There are going to be people who are going to be left behind. They're not going to want to be a part of that awakening. I don't think it's going to be a thing of survival at that point. I don't think you can survive without knowing this awakening. You really won't be able to make it. Companies are firing people left and right for not being awakened to this because they're not understanding the words that they're saying and how offensive they are. So honestly, that's going to be the first stage, but then the next critical stage will have to be action. Okay, now we know about redlining. Now we know about, the economic systems and disparities. We know about the workplace discrimination. What are we going to do to change it? Are companies going to be mindful and make that change? Don't just say, hey, we know that there's problems and Black Lives Matter. Are you companies going to actually do something about it?
Well,
awesome. Thank you.
I think
Mario,
I actually think the same, just to follow up on that point. I mean, I think the same could be said about our elected officials and our civic leaders and our professional leaders. And we talk about what companies are doing and such, but even on the political side, it's so much about being right and scoring points as opposed to actually affecting change. And it's really geared at, we talk about control and power. And, it's the same people that, these incumbents that just kind of roll through all the time. So I think that, that's another group that we need to start holding to better accountability in these impoverished places, in these different places that, it's the same people, literally people, not just like party or groups. A lot of times it's the same people that have been in there for decades, enriching and empowering themselves and leaving the public behind. So in addition to everybody else, one thing that I'm passionate about is like, yeah, policy. Like, how do you move that forward if everyone's playing a game and not taking it seriously?
And that's a topic we should definitely come back to, because I think we've seen interesting things happen in Washington with the attempt at policy. I don't know that we'd all agree or disagree that some of those things are the right moves or the wrong moves, and some of the comments that have been made at some of the people in power, left and right, have been the right comments to be made. I want to bring Mario into it right now. We'll get back to that topic, Don, for sure.
Yeah.
But Mario, going back to what we were talking about with Sabria and this. Again, the reason I keep bringing it up is because there's a very visceral, emotional feeling that comes into what we saw on TV. Whatever angle you come at this from, if you have a heart and you saw what you saw with George Floyd, that's going to fire you up. And so, can we bring about systematic change where there's such a focus on the immediacy of what has happened in front of us without taking any of that step back? And I know Sabria is saying education is only education, but can you get to making change happen while the volatility of the emotion is still there without a greater understanding society-wise of all that went into systematically?
I think when you talk about a system, there's so many layers to this system. What we've seen visually, social media, on the news, it's hurtful, and it strikes emotion. So a lot of people, their first thought process is totally that situation, that piece. But I think it's almost like, you hit a situation, you hit it saying, stay woke. That's just a small piece of the pie. So I agree with her. It's got to change in layers. And when you start talking about these different layers, I look at it and I say, whatever strikes you, that's the layer that you work to attack. What strikes me might not strike the next man. I had a young man, the night this started to change, when I was a kid, Jaylen Brown, we were all on a text. It was about 17 kids on the text. And I was just checking out on the kids. Hey, are you okay? We're right here in the seat of it now. And they start chiming in, hey, coach, we're good, we're okay, we're good. And he was making his way towards Atlanta, coming from Boston, planning on going to the protest. Young guy, millionaire. Okay, but now you're getting ready to get into the fight. Okay, 20, 21, 22 years old. All of the young guys on the Texas, the former players, that's what they're thought. They were revved up. They're ready to go protest. I don't knock anybody from protesting. Back in the day, I would have been on that front line too. But now my mind is in a completely different place because I understand it's a process. It's not just a quick hit. It's not going to happen overnight. And I'm not saying they didn't understand that it's not a process. But they were so fired up and so emotional. That's the first thing that came to their mind. We want to get to the front line. We want to protest. And I'm saying, I get it. And I support you. I will never tell you no. But my mind, being a 40 plus year old man, I'm saying to myself, okay, this is in layers. Okay, so how do I look at what layer interests me right now? June the 9th, we were probably about 2 weeks from June the 9th. No, maybe a week or whatever. But the first thing I thought was voter registration. Because June the 9th, we had our local elections coming. So I called my pastor, and that's the first thing we done. We jumped in to, mode. We're going to put together a voter registration drive right at our church. So that was one layer that we decided to work in and try to, work with. So I guess it's almost like even having committees and put this thing in the layers and pieces and say, okay, whatever it strikes you in your heart to serve, it's time to get up and it's time to serve that purpose. Yeah. Because you can't do it all at once. And not only can you not do it all, you can't do it all by so some people will have an interest in this lane and they'll know and have more information about how to be effective. Some people have an interest in the voter registration lane. Some people have an interest in, protesting and different, pieces. But I just think as a system, you attack a system in many different ways. And we have to look at this from a multifaceted attack. And we also got to think about a long term. Everybody is charged up now. What I want to see, what's going to happen in a year? Will people still feel the same way? Will people still say, you know what, I'm ready to get on the front line with you to fight the same fight with you? And especially will they feel the same way after they're educated? After they're educated to really find out what redlining is about and all these other things that have been put into place to make things like they are, will you still really have the same energy to go out here and fight this fight? That's what I want to see, because the most important thing people got to understand, this is a fight that, I don't change this skin. This has been forever for me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's, I'm going to go to my grave still fighting the same fight. So I got the endurance. I just hope everybody else has the same endurance.
And that's such an incredibly strong statement. I should say bold statement, saying I've been fighting this my whole life, right? And then you've got other people who are saying I'm just now getting educated in this. I got your back. They're still allies. I want to be clear about that if they have the right intentions. But I think the reason why we're having these conversations as I go over to Don is because it's exactly that reason, Mario. It's like the people who want to be allies and the people who want to understand you've been fighting this for 40 plus years, or someone else for 60 plus years, or someone else for 20 plus years, maybe in Sabria's case, is that the only way we keep this momentum going is by have the conversation about it that leads to the education, that leads to the greater understanding. Because I'll tell you where I think things fall off, and we'll bring some of them up a little bit later on this call, is you're on each other's side, you're going for the same thing. And I even shudder at saying sides because it's such a weird thing, right? So you're going towards the same goals. And then it's like, you read one thing just on social media and it's a campaign or it's a video that someone chopped up or it's whatever. And you're like, wait a second. I had like 99.9% agreement with that guy or that girl on where we were going together with this. I don't know that I see eye to eye with them on the way that thing is being said. Do I pull back a little bit here? And I think when we judge each other's intentions based on what we see on social and based on what we see on quick hits, that leaves a lot up for interpretation, a lot up for misunderstanding. So continuing to have these talks is so important because it continues to move us in the direction of where we need to go. And knowing that you guys have both made the point very clearly, Mario and Sabria, talk is only so much. Action has to happen, right? But like, I do think we get to better action when we have more open communication. I think those two things do work together. So Don, Mario's point was everyone's going to kind of get into it. You've been a policy guy in the past. I don't know if a lot of people know that. You've got a little bit of history in the political world yourself. So Mario's idea of systematically breaking these things up based on where our passion is, based on where it hits us the most, based on Mario saying I might be doing something different at 40 than I was doing at 20. How does that work when you're trying to change a system in terms of different people attacking different areas?
Well, I think we need to identify the root of the problem. And I think we touched on that a little bit last week as well, is that, a lot of times we go after what we see and what we hear and the interactions that we're having, whether it's online or in person. But a lot of these issues are deeply rooted, hundreds of years old, and we don't get down to the actual core problem and address that and attack that. Instead, we attack each other. We don't even know. I posted something the other day, here in Philadelphia, I'm in the Philadelphia Media Market, where they're, tearing down an abolitionist statue because they thought it was just a typical, 1800s slave owner. And it's like, you're just reacting. And I think that was almost where Mario was going too. You get this passion, you want to go. And back to Sabria's point is that you need to kind of pump the brakes and not just educate yourself, but identify, look, and listen. And that's really what I've been trying to do, is just listen more as much as educate myself, just listen and have interpersonal communications. I'm kind of in both things. Yes, we need more talks, but we need more in-depth talks rather than just more talk. And, Cordell's he did a letter to the editor in the Stanford Advocate, and we've just been having conversations with people that then reached out to him and want to help. And his biggest argument was they had this rally, they marched to the police station in Stanford, they got there, they're chanting, and they never said anything substantive. So that's kind of where I'm going. It's twofold. It's one, it's identifying the real root of the problem and trying to root that out, as opposed to scoring sound bites and social media cred and likes and stuff like that. That's great. Show you're an advocate if you're doing it, like you said, for the right reasons. But then on the flip side, when you have the opportunity to speak to decision makers and speak to influencers and let your voice be heard, then take advantage of that and do it in the right way, and don't pull punches. So again, I think for me, it's as much about an interpersonal communication as well. It's not just between blacks and whites, and it's just between people and understanding. We mentioned that. I mean, the two white guys up here are from very liberal states in the north, and you're both from somewhat conservative states down south. It's like, even that, by saying like where we're thrown into, what I see in New Jersey and Philadelphia and New York is a lot different than what you're seeing in Atlanta. It's a lot different of what you see in North Carolina. So, perspective wise, it's a big, diverse country. And we also need to realize that everybody not only has their own perspective, but they have their own issues and they have their own daily stuff that they're dealing with. And last thing, I said this last week too, I think the biggest thing that I try to do in terms of education is not just educating myself, but educating my children, right? When we've been to the Frederick Douglass House, we've been to different places, but then we've been to the Constitution Center. It's not just one history, it's diversifying yourself. This is a Native American flag behind me. I've read a lot about that and taken that up. So, but passing that on to the next generation so that each generation is hopefully a little better than the last. So
one thing that I'm suggesting for, people who are not minorities and who may want to post something, like I have friends that are like, Sabria, I want to post this, I want to say this. Can you look at it? Ask your minority friends, especially the leaders out there, the people who are CEOs of companies. Do you not have one black employee you trust just to ask before you post something crazy?
A lot of them don't.
It's just, people have been posting some crazy stuff and losing their whole companies over this. It's great. Like, you don't have to lose your whole company. Ask.
I got two stories. One, I was working with an agency and they wanted to go after Latin American market for a quick service restaurant. And I looked around, I said, I'm Sicilian. I'm the darkest one in this room. Does anyone here even speak Spanish? But they're just ready to it's like, stop. Think about what's in front of you. And the other, you mentioned this too, and I mentioned this last week, like I'm very close with a gay sports blogger. It's Outsports is what it's called. And I've hosted events, and at one of the events, I had him interviewing a transgender baseball writer, with Baseball Writers Association of America. And that was the one message that I took away from that, was what you just said. It just reminded me of that. Ask. It was right when the Caitlyn Jenner stuff was going down. She said, she's like, I'm right here. Here's my Twitter handle. Here's my email address. If you don't know me, he's like, if you have questions, it's okay to ask. Like, we have permission to ask. So It's the same thing. But it's not just, and what I'm trying to say too, is not just color, it's just race. It's in the business environment where, just be smart. Why would you even go about this undertaking with the lack of representation that you have in this room right here?
With no knowledge,
right.
No knowledge about it.
But people are just go. And that's, again, me. Listen, pump the brakes, and look at the big picture in front of you. And also look at with these people getting fired and these people saying stupid stuff, like, do they not realize when they do and say stuff that it's going to have a reaction to it, and a lot of the time adversely, and the people just ruining their careers. And maybe it's not on purpose, and maybe it's not malicious, but a lot of times it's just stupid. Like, just use your head. So I'm riffing now. I'm gonna take it easy this week.
Free flowing conversation.
Stupid people get me mad.
what's making me what it's making me think of when you guys are talking about that is you're referring to CEOs of companies. Sabria, you've got examples of folks who definitely not only stuck their foot in their mouth, but are now paying the consequences for saying stupid things. I think that's part of the issue is the big companies that do that. But let's be honest too, there's everyday people on social media right now who aren't big companies who are out there saying things because they have an emotional charge and emotional feeling towards things, okay? And again, some of these things are going to be sensitive that I'm going to bring up. Let's bring up something that's not related to any of us in terms of like we work with him, okay? But I think the interesting thing is, let's bring up the Colin Kaepernick situation all the way back 4 plus years ago when this happened, okay? When he protested, when he took a knee. And anyone correct me on the facts here because you're all sports fans here. So this is my interpretation of kind of the linear way in which this is played out. You got Colin takes the knee, right? The NFL doesn't take too kindly to him taking the knee. Some players defend him, some players don't defend him, some players are very vocal, some players are not very vocal about it. One piece that I think is fascinating as someone who worked for the NBA for a while, and I'm not throwing the NBA under the bus, I'm just stating the facts. The NBA sent out a memo to their players shortly after what happened with Colin Kaepernick taking the knee and it becoming such a big topic. Reminder that because of the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the owners, amazingly, in a predominantly black league, the memo that was sent out was we collectively bargained that we will be standing during the national anthem. Okay, so they almost came out with a strong reinforcement of a mandate, right? Okay, now you fast forward, and I know I'm skipping a lot of details right now. Colin doesn't get picked up by teams. There's a lot of controversy in terms of whether or not that's based on his skill set, based on taking too much of a chance because it's a risk from a PR standpoint, or are they going out of their way to collude and not bring him back, right? Those are all the factors. Then the Floyd thing happens. The irony in a sad way, I'll say it in a sad way, of the way Floyd dies is by a knee being placed on his neck. And so you start to see images of police officer with knee down, Kaepernick with knee down, and the communication that comes out is, maybe he was right to do this, meaning Kaepernick, so that this wouldn't happen. I'm paraphrasing, it was obviously said in a much nicer way than I'm saying right now. And I want to take a step back, and I'm not going to give my opinion yet because I want to hear from you all first. I guess that's the advantage of asking the questions first. But I can see, let's call it before the Floyd death, murder, took such a high prominence. I understand the background of people who have a certain sanctity and history and feeling towards a flag. I also understand, again, before everything with Floyd, the reason why Kaepernick did take the knee, and if you know the story, did it respectfully because he checked with someone in military service who told him that was the right way to do it. Again, let's go to Sabria just kind of to go back in that order. Let's talk about the Kaepernick situation. And I want, if you don't mind talking about it, because this is when I get around to sharing my opinion, can you talk about it from the standpoint of that whole elephant post that I put up today where everyone is seeing things from a different angle? Can you understand, first and foremost, why it would be such a volatile discussion? Or do you look at it like the guy's protesting something that's obvious, he should be able to protest it? Or do you see the different angles in terms of why people get emotionally charged about it? And in seeing it, do you understand why it necessitates more of a conversation? If so, in order for everyone to understand each other in terms of why we're taking the actions that we're taking.
Yeah, so I think that people, they missed the mark of understanding why he did it in the first place. The first place that many people went to, as just like the elephant picture, was he's against veterans, he's against soldiers, he's against the military. I mean, it's like people created an equation of the flag to the military. And while the flag does represent a lot of what, our army and military is, Colin Kaepernick was not attacking that aspect of our country. We all support our troops. We all appreciate our troops, or at least most of us, right? I mean, I would think that our country would appreciate the work that they've done. So that's where I think people went wrong first, is because they expected the worst out of this man. I don't know if Colin had been white, had it been different. I don't know, but they automatically expected the worst out of this man because of him taking a knee. I think if people understood that first, when you're in history and you're in school, we talk about when was America independent? Was it 1776 or something like that? I don't know. Yeah, right? And then slaves were free 1863, not really, kind of, not really. So he was saying that this country, this flag right here, does not represent all of us, unfortunately. While we fought in the military, my grandparents were in the military, many of my relatives. It's not about the military. It's the fact that this flag never stood for all people. It just didn't. And he was saying that this knee is representing the fact that, you know, we're supposed to be a country united under all. The actual Star Spangled Banner, a lot of it had racial connotations that were negative towards Black people in the original song. That has been changed. You know, so I think that, you know, the elephant thing, I can understand kind of why people took that angle of getting upset, but at the same time, it's like they had this wall. They could not even be willing to see the fact that maybe the flag is not only about the military. The flag can represent a lot of things in people's mind. And everybody, if people see the American flag, people will say different things. Some people will say 4th of July. Some people will say military. Some people will say the flag represents the fallen soldiers. Some people may say 9/11. When people look at the flag, everybody has a different view. But if people were willing to hear Colin and why he was doing what he did, they could have understood why he took the knee in that moment for that reason.
Why he took the knee, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the operative word there, because I'm going to go to Mario right now. Because one of the pieces that I want to get into, Sabria, is we're talking about the misunderstanding of people who didn't understand why Colin maybe himself took it. But in fairness, and again, I won't get into it until I go, is there a perception from people who look at the flag, like you said, and have different feelings about the flag? You name some of them, to where in their mind, it's less about what Colin thinks about it and more about, well, if there's a percentage of people, if there's even one person who thinks about it in this certain way because it brings this emotional charge, is that not the right time or place to be doing that? We don't have to pass judgment on that yet. I just want to set that up for future part of the conversation. Mario, how did you feel when it happened? How do you feel now? Do you feel differently? Do you feel the same?
I feel like this. You just put a big word out, emotion. Another thing that I'm trying to really learn to do is bottom my emotion and learn to listen. And then I go back to what Sabria said about people educating themselves. Those 3 words, if you tie them all in together, if people would have slowed down and just paid attention to what the man was saying, now the NFL wouldn't be doubling back saying we got this wrong. You should have paid attention in the very beginning. And I'm a God-fearing man. I believe in God all day, every day. And I'm going to tell you this. Isn't it ironic that the same knee Colin Kaepernick took was the same knee that was put on this guy's neck and has just set this whole thing ablaze? You have to be careful when people come in a certain fashion. It's the way you receive certain things. You know, unfortunately, if you don't receive it one way, you'll have to be forced to receive it another way. Mm-hmm. And what I'm referencing now is he came in peace. That still wasn't good enough. Regardless of all the different angles and the different diversions that people made into what he done, they still didn't pay attention. So after he came in peace, people didn't get it. This other situation happened, and we go from peace to chaos. Yeah. I can't even put it in words any better than that. People just have to understand that you're going to listen one way or the other. You know, and I think the best way for us to listen is in a peaceful way. You know, let's respect each other's differences. Okay? I can respect your difference in a way in which, if I listen, you can educate me about why you feel the way you feel.
Sure.
And I think that people were so busy focused on something else and so busy focused on making a problem. And I'm going to tell you, social media is what it is. But I think social media and fake news do such a good job of not focusing on what's important. And they don't focus on, they don't listen. And I think social media is just all about emotion.
Yeah, it is all about emotion. And Mary, you brought up the, kind of double back on the comment that I made, because this is also what I want to come back to. I think we got two things to talk about here. I think we got the misunderstanding of maybe why Colin was taking a knee in juxtaposed to the misunderstanding of, I do think there's some misunderstanding in why people were upset why he took the knee. Let's take the NFL as an entity out of it, and let's just talk about people. And then there's also the social media piece of, there's definitely irony in a very interesting way that the way that the Floyd death happened was with a knee when Colin's been taking a knee. Question is, and not to answer during this, because I want to circle back to this, is showing those images together back to emotion. Is that the right way to get collaborative communication going? It might be the best way to get a point across, but is it the best way to get collaborative communication going? So hold that for a second, because we're going to come back to it. Don, I want to hear your take on the Kaepernick thing.
Well, I think everyone touched on it pretty accurately, and what it came down to was, I think, and I said this earlier, I don't remember if it was on our pre-call or now, is that he ended up becoming that ping pong ball between either side. And the message that he was trying to articulate, he lost control of that message very early. So going back to the way that it was addressed and then it was brought up, right, people grabbed onto it, and then it snowballed, and there was no one there to stop it early on before it got to where it got to. And I think, right around that time, I think he changed marketing agencies and he changed agents. And there was a lot of shifting in his team going on too, which probably added to that. But back to the point of trying to do something the right way, doing it for a particular reason, and then the message and the purpose left his hands and left control. And for better or for worse, the educational part of people, you really need to spoon feed the masses a lot of times, because they are just going to gravitate to what they're familiar with or what they're reflective of or so far. So I think it was a communications issue back then. It doesn't help when, the leader of the country throws fire on it and uses it as much of a ping pong ball as anyone else. And what is that? That's just red meat for either side, and both sides dug in their feet, and there was no turning back from that point.
Right.
But I do want to say this, and I mean this respectfully to him as a player, that when you look at it now retroactively, he is so much more significant now as a figure than he would have ever been on the football field as a backup, as a starter, as a guy scrounging for 6 wins, or if a guy that won 13, 14 games. So
the world knows him.
Right. And I think that is kind of the most important part. And now, I have in my notes here too, solidarity and recognition. Right now, if people are out there protesting for awareness, or if guys are even taking a knee for awareness this year, it's not about awareness. If it's not going to get much higher than it's at right now. People are aware and people are angry. And so now I think it's about whatever action they take, whether it's a knee, whether it's locking arms, whether it's wearing a T-shirt with a slogan on it. Right now, I think that the message is about solidarity and showing that these allies have their teammates' backs and vice versa, and that they're moving forward as a team. And I think that's a point where sports might be able to come in and possibly, well, if we ever get sports back because of the other issue that we're dealing with right now. But, and then what we're all saying too, right? If we have solidarity and we have awareness, right? Forget the flag and forget kneeling and forget what that means, right? And now it's about next step. Now what do we do? Now what?
So to get to that point, Don, here's where I see the rubber meeting the road and there being difficulty, because you brought up, our president using it as the red meat, right? That it can be that makes this a volatile scenario and situation. So So I'm gonna.
And he used it as a red meat. It wasn't the red meat that he's kneeling. It was the red meat of taking the message that he wanted, using that as a message. It wasn't like he was even using the guy's message. He was using the guy's action to put forth his own message, and that's where. And
how common is that? How common is that with what we see with CNN says versus what Fox says, where they take two actions that happened or one action that happened and have two completely different spins on it based on what they believe is going to fire up the most people. Because everything's an opinion now,
whether it's social media or 24-hour news. It's not news. It's somebody putting their POV on it, their point of view on it. So and that's what happened. The action happened, and it wasn't the message that got out that the person that was doing the action wanted to do. It was everyone else's message that points to that and says, this is what happened here. And that's where I was going in the beginning about losing control of what he was actually trying to say and trying to do, because the action didn't have that direct, maybe that direct messaging right away. And again, I'm not saying it's his fault, not at all. I'm saying I think it was a situation beyond his control.
And so we saw someone like Drew Brees speak out, and you back to Sabria, your point, like just absolutely get crushed for making the comment that he made, right? Which I think is, deservedly so in this particular situation. Here's
Can I give my opinion on Brees though? Right?
Yeah, of course.
So I don't think he meant it, and I think the teammates that came to his defense and accepted his apology probably know what kind of person he is. But I think it goes back to saying what he thinks that he needs to say as the person in the position that he's in for the audience that he has, right? So if he had said, yes, Black Lives Matter, half the people are going to be pissed off at him. If he said what he said, then the other half of no, this is about if he had come out against it, right, he'd piss off the military people. If he came out pro-military, he thought he was saying the right thing, but he didn't. It was tone deaf, is what it was, and that's again what angers me. I think he got caught up in trying to say the right thing. Like some of those people that say all lives matter, I think they're thinking that they're saying the right thing, but they're tone deaf in the fact that they don't know how it comes off. So that's kind of my opinion with the Brees thing. It was like, ooh, there's a guy. Don't want to be him right now, but like again, looking back at it, like what was his intention? And forget like what he said, because again, then he lost control.
Where I'm giving Brees a hard time is the timing of when he said it is awful. Like even if I know he was asked the question, okay, but like right after the volatility of all this happening, it's not the right thing. It's not the right comment to be making. Now, where I want to go back is to Sabria's point, because I want to share, in fairness, I think this will create interesting conversation. I want to share another perspective on this, because I've heard this from other people. So we have a misunderstanding that the reason why Colin was kneeling was because the flag doesn't represent everyone, right? And so he was doing that in a peaceful way to show that the flag doesn't represent everyone. So then I had someone call me and said, Eric, I've been going to sporting events. There's a white guy. He said, I've been going to sporting events since 1963 was the year that he gave me. Okay, so I'm not going to out him with his name. And he said, what I think of when I see the flag, and when I've been going to, he said primarily baseball games, a baseball fan. When I think of when I see the flag, is I think of not our country as much as I think of the people who died for our country. Okay, like that's where his mind goes to. And so where he gets caught up is he's been 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, right? And so Kaepernick takes the knee 4+ years ago, okay? And so he looks at it and he says, the way that I've come, this guy that's talking to me, to respect the people who've died for the freedoms of our country, I myself wouldn't be in favor of protesting during that time period, because of how I feel like if I did it, not Colin, but if I did it, it would disrespect those people who've died for our country, okay? To which point, my response to him was, then shouldn't the answer be somewhere in the middle, which is now we're having this conversation where the NFL maybe shouldn't have come out as strongly against Colin and saying that he flat out should not do this, but instead to say, let's clear up why Colin's kneeing when he's kneeing, and he's got the right to kneel when he knees, and this is what it's about, while at the same time we respect those of you who want to continue to stand and believe in standing during the flag because you believe there's a different time to protest, even if you agree with what Colin's saying, because of how strongly you feel about your emotions for what that moment during the anthem means, right? And this goes back to the CEO saying the right thing. Like, I think the NFL at that time was very, and let's call the elephant in the room what it is. There is a majority white audience, right, in the stands that are watching these games. So the NFL is fearful of losing that audience. So I think it was the same case with the NBA when they sent out that message, likely, because I know the demographic audience of what's in the NBA stands. So as a business, you're making a decision, and you're making a decision to say our players will stand or we're against these players kneeling. I think the happy medium there would have been a greater education and a forum on why is Colin kneeling, but in fairness, Sabria, why also do people feel uncomfortable that he's kneeling? And let's all come together and discuss this, as opposed to there being this, it's all of one thing or it's all of the other thing, and the person's either right for doing it or he's wrong for doing it. And maybe I'm utopian, but I would love to see, for example, a mixture of now that Drew Brees said what he said, Drew Brees kneeling for half the anthem with someone who would have kneeled for the entire time, and standing up with someone halfway through the anthem for half of the anthem. And again, maybe that's completely utopian and that'll never happen, and that doesn't represent. But then you're at least showing that we both understand there's issues right now. We want to show those issues. We want to put them on display. We also want to respect all the people who believe that the flag stands for something. So I'll leave that there for anyone to jump in right now. But I did want to make sure that there's an understanding that the misunderstanding is on both sides. And it's not only a misunderstanding about Colin, it's also a misunderstanding about the people who do have that emotional charge about the flag. They have the right to have that emotional charge, even in believing and agreeing that our country may not be standing equally for everyone with the way that the flag waves.
For me, though, I think that the flag, that's just, for many minorities, that Colin Kaepernick thing, we're not even, that bent up about the flag situation. I mean, whatever, people didn't support it, it is what it is. Colin Kaepernick is so much bigger than any of this flag thing anymore. I think what I want to say straight up is I tell people right now, you get to choose what side of history to be on. We can't afford to be lukewarm anymore, and not even necessarily with the flag, but just in this space right now, you can't be lukewarm. You don't have the choice anymore. I tell people straight up right now, you're going to choose a side of history that you're going to end up on, and that your generations will look back at you and saw that you ended up on. So while the flag thing is, I get the utopia, and I get it, but I think that when you have a population, that's been going through this for 400 plus years in many different forms, fashions, and things, it's like, who cares about it? I mean, like, the flag is important, but why people are making this whole thing another thing that it doesn't have to be? You know what I mean? Like, yes, stand, sit, whatever. But for us, it's like we have done so many peaceful things, communities burnt down, destroyed. I mean, it's like, it's exhausting to the point where it's like, can we just have something? I mean, I have a lot of, non-minority friends that'll online that'll be like, let's just focus on positivity right now. That's what I'm going to focus on. I'm like, I don't get that choice. I mean, my family's at stake every single day with this discussion. So it's like, I wish that people would stop, diluting this message, whether it's the flag or stop diluting our message for once in life. Just allow us to be able to speak. So that's where I come from with this whole situation.
And I understand where, sorry, Mary, go ahead.
No, I agree. I think so many times it's people plant distraction. Stop getting distracted and just the first thing that people got to understand in order for anybody to move forward in a situation, recognize that there is really a problem. If you don't respect me enough to recognize that there's a problem, what are we doing? What are we doing? First, at the end of the day, my life, I try my best to stay by one thing. It's golden rule. Treat others the same way that you want to be treated. Mm-hmm. So let's just break it down to that situation like that. If I'm gonna treat others the way I want to be treated, and I see this young man saying, I'm kneeling peacefully because I feel like my people have been oppressed, they have been this, that, and the third. Out of decency, the first thing I need to do is just open my heart and my ears and say, explain to me where you coming from.
Yes.
Okay? And he ain't even got to explain to you. You can go back and look and see it. You can go back and look through the 60s and all of the marches and the demonstrations and civil rights. It's like people just totally forgot that all of that has happened. And now we're at this space. And then when people, make the point that, why did he do it? He had the biggest stage in the world to do it. He had one of the biggest platforms in the world to send a message that I don't think that my people have been treated fairly. So the other thing I look at is, when you have that type of platform and you have that type of stage, it takes a very, 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 I'm not even gonna say bold, but you got to have something deep within to
Something
make it.
divine.
Yeah, something divine, something from God to step out and make the stance that he made, and he was willing to forego his whole career.
Everything.
Now we're looking and saying, will he get back? Now the NFL came back and said, okay, well, we were wrong. Yeah, you were wrong, but are you going to say, okay, now hire him? And I know that's a whole other conversation that we don't even have to get into because that diverts again from the actual problem. Okay, so they talk about people who died for the flag. My grandfather fought for this country also. He came home back to Gainesville, Georgia, North Georgia. And I listened to the stories my mother told me about him being a war veteran, but he still had to go in the back of the restaurant to go get his meal. But the same people that he fought with, they went through the front with. So people don't look at that situation, and everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion. Don said that, everybody got a point of view and an opinion. But at the end of the day, with our point of views and our opinions, we still need to have a heart.
Yeah.
We need to have a concern for others. And out of your concern for me and my concern for you, if I know and I can see and I can feel when you've been done wrong, I gotta have a heart. I gotta want to get on that side of change. And Sabrina made it, complain too, like, what side of history now are you gonna be on? This is a very pivotal point in this country. I was telling my kids the other day, man, you guys are living in a time that will never be forgotten in two respects: the COVID virus and now this situation with the police brutality. So you got
maybe even politics.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a lot of angles to what's going on, but it goes back to one thing: if you got a heart, take that heart and really, really just put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Put yourself in Colin Kaepernick's shoes. Put yourself in somebody's shoes who's been oppressed. Put yourself in somebody's shoes who's been discriminated against. Put yourself in those shoes, and maybe you will never feel the whole feeling, but you'll just at least have an understanding, and maybe that'll help you start to work for the greater good of this country. And I think that's what we got to start looking at. Now, what's the greater good of this country? If we don't work toward the greater good, will we continue to fight? Is that what we want? Is that what we want to be volatile everywhere we go? I don't
know. No, and I think that's why we have these conversations, is that we don't want to. I think, and Don, I'm very curious for you to chime in here, is, I obviously am hearing all that's being said about what side of history do you want to be on, understanding Colin Kaepernick. I also want to be cognizant of there's been a history, right, wrong, or indifferent, of people that you want to be on the side of the right side of history, right? Who have this emotional charge about them. Mara, you brought up having, did you say it was your father or grandfather? I'm sorry.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather that fought and had to, be treated differently, right, in fighting. A white man who watches, games, the guy shared with me from 1963, who has a white grandfather, let's say, who fought and died for this country, he's not, in his decision to stand up for the flag, he's not he's not saying I disrespect or I don't want to pay attention to that. What he's saying is primarily number one in his mind is for my father who died defending this country or my uncle or whoever it was, I feel a need to stand up during this song.
And that, you said it, that's his decision to stand.
His decision.
And to take the action or inaction that he wants to do. What anybody else does, right, whether it's Sabria, Mario, Eric, Colin Kaepernick, doesn't matter. You know? I mean, that doesn't affect him, right? And I think that you can't project your values or your attitudes or your political beliefs or your historical beliefs on somebody else. That's
right.
When we talk about freedoms that were fought for, well, it's your freedom to have your own opinion and take your own actions, so long as it doesn't impose on another person.
Yeah.
But Don, how do we bring people together then? Because what I'm saying is, the only reason I'm bringing up that side and that opinion is because I hear it, right? And then Sabria is saying, what side of history do you want to be on? If you have a lot of well-meaning people, let's call it what it is.
I mean, what side of history is he trying to be on right there? He is honoring the people that he wants to honor the way that he wants to honor them, and nobody's stopping him from doing that.
But what it sounds like is by him standing and honoring it, whether it's him and him is 10 people, 10,000 people, or 10 million people, Sabria, tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth. Well, the impression is because he's standing, he's not acknowledging what Colin's saying. Is that the case or no?
No. So okay. Don's right. He can do whatever he freaking wants. But if he's going and disparaging Colin,
disparaging, yes.
Right.
Okay.
So if he can stand, sit, whatever, it don't matter to us, don't matter to me. I can't speak for all black people, but that's not our problem. It's the fact that people were treating Colin the way they did. It's the fact that they don't understand. I tell people that the inequities of my ancestors have impacted me to this day in many shapes and forms.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I have been directly discriminated or not, which I've gone through that already in itself, but the inequities of them have impacted us no matter how you look at it. So that's why, when I say people say you have to choose the right side of history, I'm saying the overarching side that you'll stand on. And a little bit, I want to share why I don't believe in this word ally anymore. Everybody keeps using it. I want to throw up now when people say it. And I'll tell you why, but when we get time to it. But what I want to say is, it's not about the whole right side of history in regards to the flag. It's just, do what you want. But when you disparage Colin for that message and beat him down for that message and dilute the message, that's when there's a problem.
No, and Eric,
so if I'm understanding correctly,
Eric, I see your point too, is that, those that are, let's say, pro-Kaepernick, right? They could acknowledge and respect the reason that the guy is, your friend, is doing what he does for the reasons that he does it. It's okay, like, acknowledging that, right? And acknowledging,
right.
But when it comes to this, and both sides aren't looking for acknowledgement, they're looking for the other side to submit to their opinion.
Yes, that's the issue that I have.
Yes.
And I know you don't like the term ally, Sabria, so I want to hear the term that you're open to. And I don't mean that facetiously.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
No, but where I think Don's hitting the nail on the head right there is that instead of it being this, I would hope that you just nailed it also when you said we don't want Colin to be disparaged, right? And so is there this way, and maybe this utopian happy medium is the person who feels like they could stand up during the national anthem continues to stand because in their heart of hearts and what they've experienced, that's the way they feel. But at the same time, they don't disparage, and in fact, they help share why Colin is neat. And I think, but the thing is, we have to have this conversation right now, like this, in order for people to understand that. Because when that's not discussed, when people don't understand that it's the disparagement against him that's bothering people, as opposed to the action of standing versus not standing, that's where social media starts batting heads. That's where people have disagreements, and that's where we feel like we're on different sides of the fence. And I love that we had a little bit of discomfort there, but it comes now to a greater understanding. And I think hopefully this, Mario, I think probably has some stuff to say because I've been holding him back for a while. But like going back to what I was saying with the NFL, Mario pointed out that the NFL is having a double back and saying they were wrong. I think what the NFL could have said, even in the interest of wanting to keep their fan base happy, they could have said the man has the right to protest something that he believes and that any other player believes has been inequities. Okay? You as fans, anyone else as staff, has the right to stand up because of how you feel about the flag as well. Those things can coexist, and we can still have belief and understanding that we can work together to fix any inequities that are out there, right? And to respect what we want to respect, but let's respect everyone's decision, right? And that's where the piece that I think is, it's like an all or nothing thing. It's like either Colin's awful because he did this, or the NFL is completely awful because they're not allowing Colin to kneel and they're saying he's an awful person. The answer lies somewhere in the middle of respect each other, right? So anyway, I appreciate you saying that. Mario, you've been holding off for a little bit, so I want to make sure to bring you back in.
I just feel like, you made a great point with the respect deal. Everybody needs to first slow down, listen, and understand why I feel like I feel. I need to slow down, stop, and listen, and understand why you feel like you feel. At the end of the day, we might not necessarily agree, but we don't have to be adversaries as long as you respect my space and I respect your space.
Yep.
And I think that's where, the issue came in, and I think he was talking about a little bit, further back. When you start depending on social media to educate you, that's where you end up in trouble, because what social media does is kind of insightful. They want to, social media always kind of, in my opinion, put together to make you choose a side, And so once you have to choose a side, then that's where people come in and don't respect people's differences. And that's where the problems come. But in my opinion, when I look at what, Kaepernick done and the stance the NFL made, I think the NFL made it all or nothing. And they done that, let's be honest, based on the economics.
Yeah.
So it is going to be all or nothing, because we're not going to lose our brand behind what you've done, Colin. But then you go back and think about, before Colin Kaepernick, there was Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Chris Jackson, who did the same kind of thing in the NBA. I don't think he necessarily took a knee, but I think he might have turned the other way while the flag and the anthem was being played. But you soon find out, too, he was phased on out of the league. He didn't last long after that. So, people have made their stances before. I think what we have to understand when people do make their stances, educate yourself on what they're standing for and respect their space.
And let me make one thing clear. Racial equity is not a coffee versus tea option. We don't get to say, I prefer coffee or tea, because a lot of people get this whole, let's respect people's opinions and everything like that. If you have a bigoted opinion or a racist opinion, it don't fit in the equation.
Yeah,
you
that's
can have
good.
different views about the flag and all that stuff. That's cool. But I need people to also realize that when I say side of history, it's that part. When you have these negative racial connotations, it's not a coffee versus tea choice.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure, Sabria, that someone choosing themselves to stand during the anthem wasn't considered being on the wrong side of history just because they chose to stand, right?
Absolutely.
So let's, as we're going on a good amount of time here, I want to come back to your comments, Sabria, about let's talk about ally and why you don't like the term ally, and that's okay. This is the stuff we have to talk about. What's a better term? Why does it rub you the wrong way? Like, what would be the better way to describe it?
So I'm going to school y'all on a new term that I learned about that's made me kind of turn from ally. Everybody wants to be an ally. Everybody's saying, I'm an ally, but doing the exact same thing, right? They're not changing anything about their lives. Maybe they'll post the hashtag Black Lives Matter if you're lucky. Maybe they'll tell their black friends, hey, I'm on your side, but they still do the same thing and don't change anything about their lives. I heard the concept co-conspirator. And as people, especially as non-minority people, white people, whatever, if you're not a minority, being a co-conspirator, that means you being willing to put something on the line. You being willing to take that risk. When we're, as a minority, we couldn't speak up in the workforce. We would be afraid of being fired, if we said something about racial inequality in the workforce. So as a non-minority, you have to take those risks as well. Be willing to. So one of the good examples that the lady gave of this for this theory was that, Bree Newsom, when she came down and grabbed the Confederate flag, I think off the pole, I think that's what it was, when the last police killing had happened. what happened was the police were going to tase the pole as she was climbing up. But a white man that was out there helping her put his hand on the pole. So in that moment, he went from ally to co-conspirator because he protected her with the fact that he knew that those police were not going to tase that pole with her on it.
Well, this is awesome. I get to be a co-conspirator and a conspiracy theorist. Like, I'm like racking up these titles here because I got all of the above. Yeah, and Eric, I'm telling you, man, my wife, she's hour plus. I need help.
We've touched on some important topics here, which has really helped us to dive in and to get at topics that need to be discussed. I mean, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I know that Sabria and Mario, along with Jason and Nicole from the last show, and along with Stay Whole Foundation and Shamika Holtzclaw and John Booty, are all people who were going to keep this conversation going. I don't think this conversation ends just because we had this talk. I think we build off of what's going on here, and there's a lot to be able to take away and grow. And you know what? I'll just throw it out there because I know we got a good number of people watching this last time, and hopefully be the same case this time. Is you all have each of our DMs, those of you who are friends with us or follow us, write us notes and say, here's a topic I'd like you to discuss. Here's something that's weighing on me. Here's something that's bothering me. Here's something, as Mario said, that creates an emotional charge. I want to know how it creates emotional charge for a group of people versus another group of people. What's it, to Sabria's point, we're going to get a lot into terms as we go on this thing. There's a lot of terms out there right now. What terms might be better terms for us to be able to describe how things are playing out right now? I think we can get comfortable being uncomfortable, and then that gets us to a place where, now I'm using Sabria's terms again, we can all be co-conspirators in moving forward and making our society a better place. So, Don, thank you. I know your wife is going to beat you up right now.
Eric's like, you said Tuesday and Thursdays are good. I said, they are. Usually during the day, I'm like, what, 7 to 8? And then we start going.
Don was like, let's do it Tuesday, Thursday. And I go, okay, well, Tuesday, Thursday night? Great. And like,
I got 3 kids, 12 and under, and my wife is like short leash right now.
Well, Sabria, I really thank you for joining us in your opinions. Maria, thank you for joining us in all your opinions. Again, let's keep this conversation going, and then let's talk about actions with the conversations, and I think we'll be moving in the right direction. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks all you guys for being on the panel, and we'll talk to you all in a little bit.
You guys were great. Thank you so much.
Again.